Welcome to Hot Takes Happy Hour. Danny and I are just talking. We'll
It's a good
discuss in
day.
fuller detail. Obviously we're getting together today for a special edition because of the release of the hostages and President Trump's trip to the Middle East. And, we made clear at our last Hot Takes Happy Hour, it's a first step. A lot needs to be worked out, but it's a good day, Danny.
Oh, I agree with you. Listen, I'm overseas, so I watched that. I watched it in real time. I didn't just wake
I
up
woke
to
up at
it.
4:30 in the morning, so
Did you? Oh, woman, my God, I did not.
I think I
Actually,
couldn't sleep. I was,
yeah, there's a lot going on. It's
yeah,
exciting, and I mean,
yeah.
imagine being one of these family members. Look, I there were 48 people. I guess two are missing, and unclear. One, the Nepali young man who
The
was
deceased,
kidnapped.
the 28 deceased. No, all
No, no,
20,
no. There were
all
two. There
20
were
live ones are back.
they couldn't account
No?
for they can't account for two of them, and they're not sure where they are. And this remains sort of vague. But I mean, imagine to yourself being one of these family members. Imagine, to yourself, what it's been like, and all the false alarms and everything. Thank you, Henry. The Nepali is okay. Well, then where's his body? There's
Well,
something
no,
about the Nepali that's missing.
they only sent back about 4 of the deceased hostages.
Right,
They there's still
right.
a lot more to.
Supposedly,
Yeah.
there's
Oh, yeah,
supposedly
he said
some.
he was one of the 4 bodies.
All right.
Um,
Well, anyway, it's not relevant. The point is, imagine being, these families. This is it. But again, I think we talked about this last week as well. You are saying, and Donald Trump is saying, and everybody else is saying, that, well, this remains to be worked. There are things that remain to be worked out. I suspect that a lot of things just will not get worked out.
Yeah.
Don't
Well, I
you?
want to get to that in a minute, but I just want to talk about not only the hostage families, but what was going on in Hostage Square today. And those scenes in Hostage Square, obviously there were families there, and there were families of those who knew that their loved ones were not going home, that, were dead and they're waiting for their bodies, or who already were home. But basically, it was like the whole nation, and we talked a little bit about this last week, the whole nation as a family really celebrating this moment. And I was like, you know what? I wish, and I felt this way when Gilad Shalit was released years ago, that if only America could have that kind of um, national cohesiveness on things that really matter.
Well,
Okay,
to be
we make
fair,
this.
right? Remember how many they lost. Remember the equivalent number of
No, I
people,
understand, but it
and we
didn't
came together after nine. We came
for a
together
year,
after.
for a while. But I suspect if that happened today, Danny, we would not.
I hope we
And
don't find out.
I hope we don't find out too. But, I'd love to hear from Henry and others. I feel like the nation was waiting for this moment, and that kind of, it didn't take away from what happened on October 7th, but that was a new focus. And now it's kind of like sitting with, there's nothing, you can fight for security, you can fight for peace, but a lot of these families spent the last 2 years fighting for their loved ones to come home. But now, they kind of have to grapple with the reality of what happened, I think. And
It's
there's
very
a
hard.
relief, but there's also a heaviness. It's a good day, but it's not a happy day, you know?
So right. Well, I'll remind people, just because I know this. Look, after the Holocaust, the World War II was over, and the living were the living and the dead, the millions, not just the Jews, but obviously all the soldiers who fought, let alone our enemies, were dead. But it was a time of massive celebration. And what anybody's family of Holocaust survivors will say to you is, oh no, we didn't talk about it for 20, 30 years. We never talked about it. We don't talk about it. And I think that's part of the thing that's going to be very hard for Israel, right? Is that on the one hand, you have all of these anti Semites and Hamas supporters who are not celebrating the ceasefire that they were demanding until yesterday. And we should talk about that. But everybody else is like, well, that's over. And the answer is that for
No,
these
it's not.
people, it's never going to be over, right? It's not over for the families. It's certainly not over for the people who lost family members. But it's very hard, and I think you're right to identify that as something that's going to be very difficult. It'll be also very interesting, from my perspective, to see what happens in Israel politically,
And
because
yeah,
this was a
yeah.
this was a huge this was a huge moment, and the terms were the ones that Bibi Netanyahu said he would not compromise on, which were which were that Israel gets to remain remain and keep the option for military action in Gaza, and that the hostages would be returned first, and that happened. It's amazing.
Well, if you listen to President Trump, and I want to hear what you think about his speech to the Knesset, and then
Mm,
also his speech to the Arabs.
mm,
Um, as far as he's concerned, and we know that he doesn't have a long attention span. Um, President Trump says the war is over, and he kind of gave his assurances that the fighting will stop,
mhm.
and he feels that's because people don't want to disappoint him.
Yes, it's certainly what I think every morning when I wake up. Um, look, his speech was to the Knesset was, typical. You kind of come to expect that this is gonna be how he speaks. Um, but
A
the
lot of people
reality
were
is
like outraged about like give him a pardon. It was inappropriate, but I wasn't so shocked because that's Trump.
that's Donald Trump, exactly, and, if you wanna find something to hate, he's always gonna give it to you because that's who he is. But I will say, I think you and I both talked about the fact that over the last 24 hours, everybody, Keir Starmer, Tony Blinken, pathetic, the loathsome Penny Wong, my own Australian foreign minister, and everybody else were like, "Well, we helped lay the groundwork for this." And the answer is, you did everything in your power to ensure that we would not get to this day. You did everything in your power to signal to Hamas that you wanted to help them. That's what recognizing a state of Palestine did for the French, for the British, for the Australians. You did nothing to secure the release of these hostages. You did nothing to get the Arabs to lean on Hamas, the Arabs and Turkey, to lean on Hamas in such a way that they finally were forced into acquiescence despite having said no to the plan when they saw it, right? And the New York Times, or the Wall Street Journal, I'm sorry, guys, had a really good piece about that, about how they were forced to turn around. Even Turkey told them, it's over. You got to do it, right? Those countries did nothing. And, there's a lot to complain about with Donald Trump, but I suspect that another president would not have been able to deliver in this
Oh,
way.
I completely agree. And listen, as I wrote the other day, like I'm not one who's shy about crediting or criticizing President Trump when I think I mean, that's just what we do. That's just the role we
Right.
play. Um, he deserves the credit he got. The job's not done, and I hope he's going to continue to put the pressure that needs to be. I feel like if he doesn't stay engaged, as you said just before, I don't think any of the rest of it will be engaged. He says that he will. Maybe Witkoff needs something to do. Jared needs something to do. But I will say, um in large, I think it was a bipartisan credit. Even Jake Sullivan, who isn't, again, one to credit President Trump, said he deserves all of the credit he's getting. No one has been able to do it, and it's not easy, and he deserves the credit that he's getting.
Yeah, well, good for him. Good for
No,
him.
and I mean, a
And
couple of other like representatives that were on TV said, I appreciate that there are
and
some
Hillary
people.
Hillary Clinton said it.
You know what? again, at a day like this, you kind of put politics aside and say,
some people
for
do,
one
but not
day, damn
everybody
it, for
does.
one
Not
day.
what
And,
not everybody does.
but I mean, look, and then, when you look at, Palestinians going home today and seeing the rubble and their homes, you know, um,
So we didn't talk about this, but we should. And the fact is that no one is talking about this. What has happened over the last 3 days, 4 days since the announcement that this was going to happen is an absolute travesty. Hamas has worked to reassert power
mhm.
in areas from
Yeah,
which
they're
the
running
IDF
around
has
town with their guns and everything, and nobody's like,
murdering,
yeah, yeah,
murdering people
murdering
in
people
the street.
that they think were colluding with Israel.
And
I don't, not saying that they did, but that they perceive them to be.
or they just said that they did. This is the moment when, collusion and collaboration are like corruption in China. Everybody you don't like is corrupt. Everybody who you do like is as honest as the day is long. And of course, collaborators are just who somebody particularly doesn't like at that moment. But this has been happening on video, and it has not dominated the BBC, the New York Times, CNN. It hasn't dominated the
I
news.
haven't even. I saw a little bit. Yeah.
I watched them murder people. I watched the video, a snuff video, and the worst thing of this is for all of these people who claim that they cared about the well-being of the people of Gaza to allow Hamas with impunity to go in and begin executing people is just beyond to me. The loathsome Francesca Albanese, the disgusting Greta Thunberg. Where are those people when average Palestinians, many of whom have been working against Hamas, working against the Islamists.
Particularly
Where
in the
are
South.
they?
Yeah. Well, I met with this. A bunch of us met with this senior Palestinian official, Israeli official, a couple weeks ago at the UN, and this person was talking about how there were a lot of, as you said, Palestinians in the South that were actively working against Hamas, and that they were talking to them. Like, why wasn't there some effort to kind of? I mean, there just wasn't any handover. It was like, all right, we'll pull back, but
Well, but
you know,
that's what the deal was,
that's
though.
what the deal said. But why
Yeah.
wasn't there more about? That brings us to the idea that, there's phase one and that was fulfilled. But who's going to disarm Hamas? Is Hamas going to disarm? Doesn't look like it by what we're seeing on the streets. And who is going to run Gaza?
Uh, and again, look, one of the things that you and I both know, because you were for so long chief diplomatic correspondent for CNN at the State Department. Sorry, Henry, Elise has lost her grip looking for any kind of logic. But look, we remember this. They always, anytime the peace was processing over the last 50 years, you're too young to remember some of that, but anytime they would punt that difficult stuff to later, we'll talk about other
The
stuff
thorniest
later.
issues have still not been
Right.
resolved.
And of
Right.
course, this is a perfect example of that, which is that nobody has any freaking idea who's going to disarm Hamas because the Israelis have been there in force, calling up maximum numbers of reserves, and they haven't disarmed Hamas. And Hamas fundamentally has not really agreed, notwithstanding, to disarm. Yes, of course, they signed it, but they signed it, and of course, and this will all fall apart sooner rather than later. And you're exactly right. It's not even that the devil is in the details. The devil
There
is in
are
the
no
next step.
details.
There
Right.
are no details, right? There's
Well, and
no,
that's why President Trump today, I think he was really like rallying everybody, and it was all happy in Sharm el Sheikh, Egypt, where, these leaders were looking to talk about what comes next. They weren't looking for a dog and pony show, and they got that.
well,
Um,
look, the Israelis are not going to work with them. At least not the Israelis who are in power right now, are not going to work with them. If what you thought was the right answer last month was to say the Jews are engaged in a genocide. There's a fake famine going on. I'm sorry, there's a real famine going on, and we should now declare a Palestinian state. There is not a reason in hell that you have any agency. Not to speak of the fact that these are the people who can't fucking cough up troops for Ukraine. Remember the promise of a European force?
Mm.
Remember the Brits said that they were going to be part of it. The French said that they were going to be part of it. Where is it? Where is it?
Well,
So
I
the
mean,
idea that they have
let's
any,
forget about the Europeans for a minute. And I don't necessarily know that they needed to be there today, to be
mm,
honest.
yeah,
I
they just
feel
want to give
like
the credit.
Israel has been, secretly meeting with a lot of these Arab states. I mean, some of it is out in the open, but they've also been meeting with a lot of Arab states on just the whole security in the region and Iran and everything. So it's really a complicated kind of web of interests and conflicts and, everything between Israel and these Arab states. But I feel like there's enough familiarity now that they have been getting together that if Israel wanted to get out of the quagmire of Gaza again and, work with the Arabs on getting that force in, getting some security, they could.
Elise, let me just honestly, yeah, I saw that. There is no famine. UNRWA, you saw UNRWA said 2 days
I'm not
ago.
going there.
The UNRWA
I
said
don't
2 days
call it
ago.
famine, call it hunger. I don't care. To say
Right.
that no
Or just call
Palestinian
it
is
fat ladies
hungry,
waiting for murderers
yeah,
to be
there are
released.
fat ladies waiting for murderers, and there are also kids that are suffering. So let's move on from that. I'm not going there.
I've already gone there.
Okay, you've gone
Um,
there and whatever.
I'm always going to go there. I hate the United Nations and their lying anti-Semitism. But back to your question. Back to your question. Look, I hate to say this because I love what the thing that you're describing, which is the idea that behind the scenes, everybody's like, okay, we got to freaking fix this. That the Israelis are talking behind the scenes, no attitude with the Emiratis and the Saudis and everybody else and the Egyptians. The Jordanians were interestingly not very present in any of this. We should talk
Well,
about
King
that in a sec.
Abdullah was there.
Was he? Maybe I just overlooked him
He was
because
like in
my
the back. I guess I don't mean literally in the back row, but I mean, yeah, I think they're training. You know what I mean? They're trying to do whatever, but they don't want to poke the, Muslim Brotherhood bear that's in their own country and they're Palestinian.
maybe if he learned to govern a little better, that wouldn't be a problem. But I digress. But look, you and I know all too well the notion that the Arabs are going to come to together and provide some sort of coherent substitute for Hamas in Gaza is a pipe dream. These are people who couldn't organize their way out of a paper bag. And I love my people. I love the Gulf guys who are very sincere. There are a lot of very smart, very serious people, and certainly, in Egypt and in Jordan as well. But the idea that they could put together a force that is going to deal with, they can't even deal with the Muslim
Yeah,
Brotherhood in their own country. They're going to
like
take
and
over.
President Trump as chairman of the peace board is going to do it too. Well, I mean, I guess they know that. That's why they're bringing in, Indonesia and Pakistan, and it's like, you
Like,
know,
really, I mean, my God, those people are worse than some of them are worse than Hamas. Certainly, the Pakistanis are not somebody who I would bring in. But I just don't know where this goes. So I want to ask you a question.
mm.
Does the sort of the anti-Semitic horde in London and Paris and the United States, do they get bored when there's not, do they, or you saw what they said yesterday, right? Which is, no, now we need to move on. Israel must be destroyed, right? They are more committed to
I'm going to
Hamas's
tell you
cause
about
than Hamas.
something that has been bothering me since yesterday. I grew up in a area of New Jersey. I call it Springsteen country because it's down by the shore where he used to, Bruce Springsteen. I actually grew up in the town right next to him called Freehold, and he sings about Highway 9. And these are all my, but I digress. on my haunts. There's a town next to Marlborough where I live called Manalapan, and I don't know if you read about this, but there was this text chain among students at freshman students or at Manalapan High School or whatever, and they were talking about like killing the Jews and gassing the Jews, and that they're all going to go as Holocaust victims. And I'll send it to you. And I was like, "What the fuck?" First of all, I grew up in a very Jewish neighborhood that's kind of become, I mean, I think they're still Jewish, but they become more supporters of Trump. But I don't really know about Manalapan, which is this town next to. But I was like, uh, where does this come from? They're freshmen. I mean, I don't think they were learning this in middle school. They're learning it on social media and their parents, you know. So I don't know. I mean, I think they'll find something else, you know. I think they'll find something else.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right because I'm tired of being
But there
I'm
is
tired
a,
I'm tired of being in the
I have a
crosshairs.
piece coming out about how, you know, I do think, did you read about this campaign that Israel has now to go target American Christians to kind of um really target for more support because the poll after poll is showing that American support for Israel has, you
And
know,
what Jewish intermarriage rates are?
no,
So,
what are they?
well over 50%, close to 70% in a
My
lot of
mom just
places.
wants me to get married. Henry, you were supposed to make shidduch for me.
Uh,
Shimon Perez promised to make shidduch for me. So
yeah,
I might have
so
an interfaith marriage myself. I might
you may have to. You
I
may
might
have
have
to.
to. Might have to raise the average. But but so American support for Israel is really at an all-time low, and now they're trying to raise support among evangelicals, where even you remember that Charlie Kirk memo to
Mm.
President Trump that, conservative support is, have a five-alarm fire. So I mean, I think that Israel knows about this. But I don't know about these anti-Semites around the world. Like, I don't know.
Well, the answer is that it's gonna be very hard, and of course, this goes to I did a podcast for, an old friend at the Middle East Forum, um, uh, uh, day before yesterday, and I got asked the great, and easy question, "How do we solve this problem of the Islamists and the
I'll
far
tell you how to solve
leftists?"
it. How
And
did
I
you
was
say
like,
solve it?
uh,
I'll tell you how you solve it.
"Tell me."
Well, listen, I think if this plan or, if peace takes hold or, whatever, and there's an opportunity for like more normalization between Israel and let me finish, in the region, it's going to be really hard for some college protester that doesn't call Israel legitimate if, Arabs are starting to normalize with, and that narrative is just not there anymore. It's just going to be it might be among their friends, but if you don't have countries kind of beating the drum against Israel every day and there's more of a better atmosphere diplomatically, I think it makes it really hard for, this narrative to continue to flourish.
Well, I hope you're right, and I hope that there's a rational way that this ends based on facts. I do agree with you wholeheartedly that, it's critically important that Israel has recognized that its support is wavering. It has been a problem for more than 2 decades, frankly
Mm.
speaking, and so from my perspective, jumping up and down and screaming that AIPAC and the traditional pro-Israel organizations are no longer effective in America is has not has n not had a willing audience. And so this needs real work. On the question of Europe and what they call the red-green alliance, red being the commies and green being the Hezbollahis and the Hamasniks, I am less sanguine than
But
you. I hope it's true.
it's even dissipating among Jews, though, Danny,
I
support
re
for Israel.
Of course, but, support for Israel, just because people are Jewish doesn't mean that they support Israel,
Well,
and
no,
this is what I try.
I mean, I've been talking about this all the time. Like,
Right.
I have an affection for Israel. I support Israel's existence. I didn't vote for Netanyahu and his policies.
Of course
So,
not.
I mean, I think
You
that,
voted for Donald Trump, right?
yeah, I think that, you know,
I'm just
I,
joking, everybody, really. She did.
I'm an independent. I know I am an independent, but, I am. But now I lost my train of thought.
I
And we
know,
only have
because you're
4
an
minutes.
independent. You're thinking too independently, but
Thinking
that's
too
your right.
independently.
Of
No, I
course
was
not.
saying
No,
that,
the
like,
American Jewish community has never.
I think Netanyahu has, I think I won't say he's responsible for anti-Semitism. Obviously, that's ridiculous. But I think he's fanned the flames of conflating criticism with Israeli policy with anti-Semitism, because they're not always the same.
They're not always the same, but more often than not, they are.
I
And
don't
that's
believe,
not.
I
Yeah,
believe that's true
I
in
know you
certain
want to believe that. I
sectors.
don't agree.
I believe that's true in certain sectors. But I think since October 7th, they've become part and parcel of one another.
Look, I don't. I think the Bibi can be blamed for a lot of things, including bringing people who are truly loathsome into the government. Although the Israeli political system is just a disastrous nightmare in its construct. But I don't blame Jews for the behavior of anti-Semites wherever they can be found. In any case, I hope there'll be some dissipation. I worry that there's a lot more energy behind this than we realize, and we've talked about this before. Part of the reason for that isn't substance. It's not that people care about a policy or know who the Israeli foreign minister is, or where Khan Yunis is, because 95%
They
of these
don't.
people have no freaking idea where Khan Yunis is, or
Yeah.
what a Palestinian is, and wouldn't know one if they bit him in the butt. But, she said elegantly, but
Dear
at the
lady.
end of the day, part of the problem for us is that there is this far left, and to a certain more limited extent, far right nexus that brings together all of this crazy ass shit, if I may call it
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
On the left, it's that you can't be, and we've talked about this before many times. It's not that you can't be pro-choice anymore. You have to
You have
be
to buy the bundle.
pro-choice. You
Yeah.
exactly, and you said that, and I actually quoted you on this podcast, saying you got to buy the package, right? You got to buy the
Yeah. If
bundle.
if you're a progressive, you need to be like Israel is a settler colonial state. And
Exactly. And I
yeah,
don't see how we break that.
we
I don't
just
see
have
how Gaza changes that.
we just have 1 minute. What do you think President Trump needs to do, and what do you think he's going to do to make sure that this stays? I know you don't think he's going to, but if you wanted him to,
Look,
when you
I don't, I will say exactly what I wrote the other day. And I haven't written something else in large part because I said it. And I continue to believe it's true. The point here is not to figure out how to contain Hamas. The point is that you cannot beat something. They are something with nothing. And
Mhm.
we have, for the last, ever since our friend Elliot, you and I talked about this last week, and we have to continue to talk about it, because if you
Who,
don't
if you
have
don't
a
figure out
solution,
who for
who,
Gaza or the
and how?
Palestinians, not just Gaza,
Yeah,
I'm
West
afraid of
Bank,
what happens in the West Bank now. If you
totally
don't get help, and they need help, if you don't have the Palestinians get their own shit together,
right.
then
And
there
they
are
won't.
Palestinians who want to. Come on.
Right. Yeah, of course, I agree with you completely, but they won't get it together because look, this is, just to remind everybody what happened in Egypt, right? Mubarak, dictator, pharaoh, kleptocrat, tyrant, right? they moved to overthrow him. It's people like you and me who went to Tahrir Square in 2010 and 2011 to try to protest against Mubarak. But who took over that movement? It was the Ikhwan, it was the Muslim
Islamists.
Brotherhood. Right, because they are organized. So the idea that good guy Mohammed and good guy Ahmed from the West Bank and Gaza are going to get together and they're going to stand up a decent Palestinian government in the face of genuine, organized, well
Right,
armed,
but after
well
the
funded forces.
after the Muslim Brotherhood took over, then they elected Sisi, and he's back. I mean, he's not
And
as
he's
bad
back
as
to Mubarak.
Mubarak, but he's
Yes, he
not as
is.
bad. But he's bad.
I think he's worse than Mubarak, but
Do
that's a
you?
different topic. Yeah, I do.
That's a different topic.
Yeah, that's a different topic. But I have thoughts about that too. But so if we don't help them, and it has to be us, that's the other thing. And of course, I have been much happier. You know, I said this last week. Uh, I never thought I would welcome back Jared Kushner with open arms, but Steve Witkoff could cause me to run into almost anybody's arms. If Jared Kushner remains engaged with this, maybe there's some possibility that they will actually try to help construct something that can challenge the status quo, the Fatah, the Hamas, the PIJ, those guys. Because absent that, it's all going to default back because we'll have another crisis. We'll have China, we'll have Taiwan, Russia, Ukraine.
Yeah,
Something.
President Trump is already meeting with President Zelensky this week.
I know.
He's
I
on to
saw.
the next one. War number 9.
Hey, Peace Prize, baby. Got to keep your
Yep.
eye on the
You know
ball.
what? And I said this. Look, that deal was only 5 minutes old, so I wouldn't give it to him this year for this deal.
Yeah,
And
well,
there are concerns about some of the democracy at home and treatment of allies. If this holds, I'd give it to him next year.
I, I, I have, I have never met anybody who got the Nobel Peace Prize who I thought deserved
Deserved
it
it.
and who wasn't a scumbag. So I don't care who they give it to.
Nobody?
No,
Hmm.
nobody.
That's a good one for the comments. Is there anybody who that got the Nobel Peace Prize that deserves that? Maria Ressa is not so bad.
Maria Ressa is a rabid anti-Semite. You go back and read that speech she gave for the commencement at Harvard, and when she was taught, when someone reminded her that she sounded like an anti-Semite, she said, absolutely not," and wouldn't countenance it. The sinister tech money, yes, she's foul. Rabin and Perez, maybe okay, Henry, I'll give it to you. Malala is a lovely woman. Okay. All right. Maybe I'm being a little bit too general. We are way over our time.
Okay.
It's so great
Thanks
to see
everybody for
everybody.
good to see everybody. Thanks for coming for this special edition, and we'll see you on Thursday. Bye.
Chag Sameach, everybody. Bye, Elise. Ciao.
Ciao.